Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rawkode Live. I am your host Rawkode. Today we're taking a look at Okteto. It is a Kubernetes development platform to empower your developers to innovate faster on cloud-native applications. Now, before we move into that, there is a little bit of housekeeping. If you are not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so now. Remember to click the bell and this will get you notifications for all new episodes of Rawkode Live as we explore the vast cloud-native landscape together. Also, if you're not watching live or you just like to chat, we do have a very active Discord server with a few hundred people in there now talking all things cloud native, Kubernetes, and everything in between. So feel free to jump in there, say hello, and I look forward to seeing you. Now, in order to take a look at Okteto today, I am joined by founder and CEO Ramiro. Hello, Ramiro. How are you today?
Hey, David. Good being here. Thanks for the invite. Good seeing you.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. This was a request from a member in our Discord community who was like, I really want to see a Rawkode live on on Okteto. And I was like, all right, let's make this happen. And there we go. Here we are today, hopefully showing everybody what's happening. I do have a comment which does have me slightly worried that people suggest that I was potentially muted during my start. I hope not. But it's the same waffle that I say every time, so you've heard it before, hopefully.
Is it you that's muted or me that's muted?
I don't know. We'll just move forward. It's, if I was muted, I'm sorry, Russell. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'll look into that for the future. So why don't you give us the all about Ramiro? Do you want to tell us about... Oh, we're getting a no voice or screen from Sam.
Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun. It looks okay on my end. I will, however, check. But while we do that, do you want to tell us a little bit about you, Ramiro? Oh no, Russell says it was his laptop. You all are giving me the fear today. That's what's happening.
We're just putting us in the spotlight.
Yeah, I've got the video. I'm now watching my own show, well, streaming on my own show, and feel like a bit of a dafty. But from what I can tell, it looks okay. Sorry about that, Ramiro.
Yeah. No worries.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and then we'll talk about Okteto after that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, my name is Ramiro. I was originally born in Mexico. I grew up in Guadalajara, and right after school, I went to school there for computer science. Right after that, I moved to the U.S. I've been living in the U.S. for about 11, 12 years now. First in Seattle. I used to work at Microsoft there. I was part of the Azure team, or as it was called back then, .NET Services, something. But ever since then, I've been working on DevTools, which was one of the luckiest things for me. Was I ended up right after school working for Azure, building services and DevTools. From there, moved to the Bay Area, joined a startup that a couple of my friends started, Elasticbox, a few years ago, kind of the DevOps puppet space. And since then, I've been working on different companies and all around DevTools. I work at Elasticbox. I work for Atlassian, where I was part of the team that was building HipChat and a bunch of other internal things. And then about 2.5 years ago, 3 years, I decided to quit my job. Two of my closest friends, Pablo and Ramon, who were working at Docker and Gmail at the time, we all decided to quit and start Okteto, just because we kept seeing all these problems around companies building teams building microservices on containers on Kubernetes, and we kept seeing that they were having all these awful problems around not being very effective and a ton of friction. And that's how we started Okteto. It was first an open source project, and slowly kind of started to take a life of its own, and we ended up with a company. Now we're like VC funded and building this cool platform.
Awesome. That's a really great backstory. There's something really great about building developer tooling. I've always found myself slightly, pulled towards that. I don't know if it's a sector, an industry, or just tooling in general, but it's very rewarding to empower and make developers more efficient and happier, and just getting rid of all that toil and pain from developing applications. So, really good thing to be working on. So,
oh no, 100%. That's always been every team I joined, unintentionally. I always been that developer who's always like trying to improve. Like I remember I joined this team I won't name them, but I joined the team and it was like, what? There was like at that point no CI, no process. So I was spending a lot of nights kind of for fun, like setting up, a CI server, validation for pull requests. It was always about how I just enjoyed kind of like building this tools to make my team more effective, have them struggle less. And I don't know, it comes with my nature. I've never been able to avoid it. Even when at some point I was like, I'm done with DevTools. That's when I joined Atlassian. I went to this chat product, and I ended up building DevTools behind the scenes for my team. So I do like it. I think as you said, there's something really cool about being able to empower developers and really help. Like good tools really multiply a team's effort. That is something I've seen, and that is something that we're trying to replicate with Okteto is just make people as efficient as they can, because I do believe that we can build really cool stuff, and developers have passion to build and change the world. So giving them tools to make their lives a little bit easier so they can focus on their goals and not on this low level kind of like infra deployment kind of issues, it's super rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm the exact same kind of developer as you. Every team I've went to is like, I just love finding points of friction and trying to automate them away or provide tooling to get rid of them and stuff like that. So you can tell just by that, I'm very excited about looking at something that, the quote from your website, I think it's great: empower developers to innovate and deliver cloud native applications faster. I would like to do that personally, so I'm looking forward to our demo today. Okay, do you want to, if I ask you what Okteto is, do you want to talk about that, or do you want to dive straight in? Will we do both?
Let's dive straight in. I think the best way to tell you what Okteto is by you seeing what we can do, and we can always stop in the middle, and if anybody has questions, we can answer them as we go, I think.
Of course, yeah, definitely. If you are watching just now and you want to ask any questions, drop them straight into the YouTube chat. We will do our best to tackle them as we go through our little demo today. So this is Okteto.com, the homepage. There's loads of nice cool things here for you to flick through, but we are going to dive straight into the documentation for today. We will be working through the quick start guide, taking a few little segues as we go to look at some of the features that Okteto provides to you. So to get started, I am going to register for Okteto Cloud. Log in with GitHub. Oh, it's popped up over here. That's always fun. There we go. Okay, Ramiro, it is now your chance to shine. What am I looking at, and what is Okteto?
Right. So what you're looking at is what we call the developer dashboard. When you log into Okteto, Okteto is a platform that gives you self-service access to Kubernetes. One of the first things that we wanted to kind of like build was this management layer on top of Kubernetes to automate all the things that developers need to do to work. So when you log in, the first thing that happened is that we already created a namespace for you, applied a bunch of like network policies and other types of policies. We created an account for you, and we provision a quota. So at this point, you are ready to start. You could download your Kube credentials. You can directly deploy your dev environment on Okteto. And if you follow the Getting Started guide, that is what's going to happen. And as you deploy applications, you will see that this dashboard starts to fill in with your apps, your logs, the status of things. The idea here is that for 80% of your tasks, you're not going to have to go back to the terminal. You can just see what's going on with your applications and your dev environments right on this dashboard.
Okay, that sounds cool. So we have to get something deployed then, right? I know it's kind of...
Yeah, that's how the whole thing starts. The first thing you do is you deploy your dev environment. We have a bunch of samples, or you can deploy from your own GitHub account.
Okay, let's deploy the Okteto Movies application. No?
Yes, that's our sample. So if you click on the other tab, on the Git URL tab on the right,
yep.
That will give you the shortcuts to the sample.
Oh, of course. There we go. That's nice. Removing friction already. I like that. Now I should read the docs. I was just going to click the big deploy button. But...
Go ahead and deploy. I know we're all developers. We like to go faster things, so deploy.
Yeah, I get myself in trouble whenever I do that. And I don't need the docs. No, we'll just click this button. We'll do this. It's nothing works. Sorry.
And honestly, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Is you should be able to use deploy without like looking anywhere else. And then when you get stuck, you find the docs. That's how I like my tools.
Oh, definitely. I couldn't agree more. So let me try and speculate at what I think is happening here, and I guess maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But it looks to me like it's cloned a repository. In fact, I mean, it's telling me it's cloned a repository. So, this is that bit's a given. We've got an Okteto build, which looks very similar to just a container image build of some kind with a tag and a directory that it's building. I'm assuming it's found a Docker file in the movies directory. It has built an image and it is just going to deploy that to this Kubernetes cluster that you have provided. Is that close?
Yeah, that's pretty close. So when you create an account on Okteto, some of the other things you have access to besides a Kube cluster is that you also have access to a remote build service. It's a service we're running on Okteto Cloud. It's powered by BuildKit with some changes we made on top of that, and also a container registry. And the idea is kind of the same, reducing friction. You don't have to think about building the image. You don't have to think about where you're going to push it. Okteto takes care of all of those things. If you look in that repo, you'll see there's an Okteto pipeline file. That is a file that you can use to tell Okteto how to build and deploy your application. In this case, you'll see we're building. You use Okteto build to use the Okteto build service. And then just a typical Helm upgrade. In this case, we are using the git commit to ensure that we have a unique image. And this is one of the patterns you'll see in our samples, is the idea that you deploy, it's self-contained, Okteto builds all the artifacts you need. And because you have a shared registry and a shared build service, you'll see that a lot of these things are way faster than local, because now you're going to take advantage of the fact that it's running on the cloud. And because it's a shared service, you and your team can share like base layers of your containers, certain caches, and things like that to make your life easier. You just click, deploy, and it builds everything for you.
Okay, cool. What are these three lines? I'm curious.
That's interesting. That's part of Okteto. Besides Okteto Cloud, and if you walk through the demo, you'll see it. There's a CLI that allows you to develop directly on the cluster, and that's what the Okteto YAML is. It's a command that you run locally. It will synchronize your code, keep your code hot loaded with your container. So that dev part of the pipeline is just a way for you to give your team a hint of how to use Okteto. If you go back to the UI, you'll see there's a button that says develop. Is that play button on the left? If you click on it, you'll see that the hint pops up.
So just start development.
Yeah, just click one of them.
Okay. Do you want me to click that now, or do you want to cover anything else on this screen? At least
So the other things you see on that screen is when you deploy an application, Okteto integrates with Cert Manager to create like SSL certificates for your apps, and it's going to give you a public endpoint. So again, you don't have to worry about it. The whole idea is you deploy and you see your app. This is a live link that when you redeploy, it will get updated with your code, and it's something you can share with anybody. It works on the internet. And yeah, we have this application. It's a multi-service app just to kind of showcase how Okteto works. There's a bit of a bug in that app that will, as part of the getting started, we'll show you how to fix.
Is that why I can't watch the Equalizer too? Because I was getting quite excited there. Are we going to fix that? Okay, that's really cool. I love.
And the other thing is, if you click on the components of your application, you see the state and you see the logs live from the pod. So you don't have to go and run kubectl logs, find the name of the pod, and all those things. You can get it directly from here. If you were to have more than one container, you can filter by container. If you were to have more than one pods, you can also filter by pods. And again, it's just about putting the information that developers need on a dashboard in front of them, so they don't have to go digging for these things as they are writing their code.
Nice. I like it. You also mentioned there we go. I can download the actual kubeconfig if I want, and I can just work with my development cluster directly.
Exactly.
So pretty flexible right out the bat. Okay.
That is part of our vision. There is, developers use a lot of tools. Every developer has their own workflow. Yep. So for us, it's important to be able to integrate with everything else on the cloud native space. Like you can download the credentials and you can use kubectl, customize anything else you want. Helm charts. We just released an integration with docker-compose, and the idea is we want to empower and extend the developer's workflow, but we don't want to force them in a very specific path of like, you have to rewrite your applications to have this or that shape. So we're trying hard to do that, and giving you access to the Kubernetes namespace, it's an important part of that.
Awesome. So you said a few minutes ago then that I should click on the start development on one of these services. Is that still where you want to go, or should I go back to my docs and stop making it up?
Go back to the docs and let's follow those.
All right, yeah, so we've done this. So we took a look at the application. It looked great. Oh, I have the ability to install the Okteto CLI. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
All right.
The Okteto CLI gives you the kind of like the computer side, like the terminal side aspect of this. Run Okteto login to connect or namespace.
Yes, please. Yes. And I am logged in. Painless.
There you go.
So that has created a context in my local kubeconfig.
So it's not active just yet, I think.
Is that going to be my other?
Yeah, not yet. So run Okteto namespace first. And then one of the things we do here, and that's why that command didn't work, is that Okteto gives you access to a namespace, not the full cluster. And the idea behind this is that as a developer, we want you not to care about infrastructure. We just want you to care about your application. So we found like the namespace context, the namespace abstraction is a good one for that. So just do like get pods. And then you have, admin access to your namespace. You can deploy whatever you want there. We apply some policies to make this, so you can play well with everybody else who's using that shared infrastructure, but you should be able to just run your application on anything there.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so we've run namespace. We've now pulled in that kubeconfig. We authenticated against the service. I can now clone the movies repository. So is this already a kind of a fork in the getting started guide? Like there are two different ways to get started. Like I'm assuming if I clone this and run these commands locally, I can just develop against a cluster. Is that different? Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm making this up now, but what happens if I click the start development? Because my interest is definitely peaked now.
Click on it. That button is going to show you the same instructions that the getting started will show you. Okay. It's a way to tell people, hey, this is how you use Okteto. Because what happens with Okteto, and one of the things that we're doing that really sets us apart, is that our flow is you deploy your dev environment on this cluster, so you have an application that's functional, and now you use the CLI to start developing. In this case, this example shows you how to develop an API. So you just run Okteto up, and that will transform this application into what we call your dev environment.
Yeah, that error was just because I was using I already had my kubeconfig set to a relative path, which was never going to work. So that should be fixed now, hopefully.
Yeah, we have to do a lot of things on the CLI to enable those sort of things. It's tricky. So what's happening now is you earlier on the stream you showed this Okteto.yml file. So what's happening now is that Okteto is using the information on that YAML to transform the existing API deployment into your dev environment. And transforming means everything from relaunching it with a different image, if you have a special container with your dev tools, getting all your code, synchronizing your file, and forwarding some ports. At this point, Okteto opened a terminal for you, and you are on the dev container.
Is that what I did see my prompt change, and then I ran get
right. That's what it changed. and if you look at the context and namespace, it's telling you where you are. So, for instance, just dump the environment, and you see one of the very cool things about this model is that you have the same configuration that your application has. So you have access to the same environment variables. This is running with the same identity that your application is running. So as you write code, it's going to save you that step of writing your code locally, then push it to Kubernetes, and then test it there. And instead, you directly, write your code on your IDE. Okteto will synchronize that to this dev container, you can then just run your process there and test directly in your cluster so that you know that your application works with all the other pieces that are still there, but they're still in what we call production mode, which is the same way that your application is defined. So this is just a normal shell terminal. So if you run yarn install and yarn start, you can just get the API started again.
All right, I think it's...
So if you go back to the, actually, let's do something. Stop that process. Do a Control C, and go back to the browser, and hit the application.
Okay, so we want to hit the front end. We want to click on this link.
Okay, you see that now the API is not, the application is not loading. That's because the API is not running. So now go to your dev container and just start the, but do yarn dev instead of yarn start. It's yarn dev. No, it's open your IDE, or that. Beam might not be there, and that's on purpose because we want you to use your IDE. Oh, yarn start. It was yarn start. There we go. So that will start, in this case, the application with node mode, so that it will hot reload as you make changes. So if you go to your IDE and make a change on the API code, Okteto will synchronize the code, your process will hot reload, and you're going to be able to see the changes in real time.
So modify the code locally, and it's going to be propagated to my dev container, which is running in a Kubernetes cluster on Okteto.
Exactly.
Okay.
So for instance, the bug I was telling you about is if you go to the API and go to the main file there, which I think is the server.js, and then just navigate through the code and find the call to API watching, which is the next block.
Yep.
So on line 43, this application has a bug. I'm gonna give it away, which is there. It's calling the movies collection instead of the watching collection. So before you make any changes, go to the browser and reload your application to kind of get our baseline. So you will see that both lists, movies and continue watching, are the same list, and they should not be. One should be the movies available. The other should be the movies that Cindy is watching. And Cindy's are kind of like our persona, our default user. There's a funny story, but I'll save that for later.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is if I update this to be the watching collection and hit save as we go back, we should see that change happen at our front end of our application.
Exactly. So just go back to the browser and reload.
Look at that.
And there it is.
What am I watching?
And if you go to your terminal, you'll see that node mode detected a file change, reloaded. And the cool thing about this is that you're testing your changes without having to rebuild your containers, without having to run, a local minikube or any of those things. It's just about you focusing on your code, building your application, and Okteto takes care of all the other things underneath.
Very cool. I like that. How is it syncing the changes from my local directory? Is that part of the Okteto up?
Exactly. The Okteto up is doing, there's like three stages. The first one is it's going to find the deployment. And why don't you open okteto.yml to kind of explain the different things it's doing? Or maybe the easiest.
This one or the pipeline?
That one, exactly. So the first thing you have is name. That is what's telling Okteto which deployment you're going to target to turn into the environment. In this case, it's the deployment called API. You could also specify a label, selector, and more complex things. So the first thing that happens is Okteto up will go to the cluster and find a deployment named API. Then we have a mutation webhook that will apply certain overrides. In this case, it's just a starting command, but you could override environment variables, inject more files, have extra secrets, like even change your image, anything you need to develop. So that's the second thing it does. It's redeploys your pod, applies these dev overrides, and as it boots up, then it's going to do two more things. One is it's going to start a synchronization process on your local machine, and it's going to inject another synchronization service on your container. We use an open source project for this called SyncThing, and that is what keeps the files in sync both ways. If you modify a file on your local machine, it will be synchronized to the container. If you change a file on the container, it will be synchronized back into your local machine. If you do like a PS aux on either your local machine or the container, you will see these processes running.
Well, I mean, I need to know this.
Yes.
So that's in the source directory of the API, package.json. So look at that.
There is.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
So that one's pretty useful, for instance, when you do a yarn install, because then it synchronizes your log file. And there's a special file there called .stignore, where you can configure if you don't want things to be changed. Like if you want certain files, like you don't want your node modules to be synchronized, you don't want your .git to be synchronized, and you can add whatever you need there. That's like super flexible. We create a default based on the language of your repo, but you can add whatever you want depending on your application. 10 files, static assets you only want on your container, or test results you only want locally, things like that.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. I understand that. So you said I can run a PS locally or in this. Oh wait, and there's our syncing processes here. And again, I guess I just did that locally. I'll see the same thing. So they're communicating with each other.
Yeah, and there's also that Okteto remote. We also start an SSH server. So this terminal you're seeing, it's actually going over a mix of kubectl port forward and an SSH tunnel, so that you can also forward any port you want from local to remote or vice versa. So for instance, right now, you'll see that Okteto YAML is forwarding port 8080. You could go to localhost 8080 and you're going to hit the API. What's more fun is that you can also use that to forward the port of your debugger. And then you can do things like debug remotely.
Oh, sorry,
so that is,
should I run that in my own machine?
You have to start the process first.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, so sorry, what was the next step? I got confused there. I got too excited and I lost my
go back to the, I think, where do you run? Go back to the VS Code. I think that's where we're running the, or no, it's here actually. No, just do yarn star there, yeah.
Oh yeah, I turned that off. Okay, so we run yarn start again.
And then open a local terminal.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, I like that.
I think you have to do /API and /health or something. But yeah, that enables a lot of really cool scenarios because you can do forward and reverse proxy tunnels. So you can do, for instance, if you have a database running on Kubernetes, you could have it piped through Okteto, so you can still run your local, I don't know, like the MongoDB IDE. Or if you want to run a debugger, like this project comes configured to use a debugger, so you could start the node process on a debugger, and then on VS Code, debug and do step-by-step debugging on the IDE with a process that's running on the container. And all of this goes back to the same idea of we want to make it easy for developers to develop the same way they do locally, but expand that to like an entire namespace or an entire cluster in certain scenarios. And yeah, and one cool thing about the Okteto CLI is that today you're using it with Okteto Cloud, but actually the CLI works with any Kubernetes cluster. If you have your own, if you have Minikube, K3s, any of those, it just works. As long as it's Kubernetes compatible and you have a kube config, it will just use that. So it's something that you can use even if you don't want to use the rest of the platform, if you don't want to use the cloud, or we also have a self-hosted version of Okteto Cloud that you can install on any cluster. If you don't want to use those things, you can still benefit from this flow of dev container, sync your code, hot reload, super fast. So that's something that a lot of our users really, really like as they build things in Minikube, in K3s, or anywhere else. I personally believe that people should not be running clusters and use like a remote thing, but different developers have different workflows, and we all work with what works for us.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that right. I can run Okteto up with a kube config pointed to my own cluster, and I get all of the same ability to develop my application in VS Code and do the debugging if I want with the shared ports and sync thing. But I won't get any of the UI, right? But
exactly. You don't get the UI, you don't get the build service, you don't get the automatic ingress creation. All those things is what the platform gives you, But the core dev experience of dev environment on Kubernetes, sync my code, port forwards, terminal to the container, all that works on any Kubernetes cluster.
Okay, but I did use the UI. I haven't given you any credit card details. I'm assuming there's a nice flexible free tier there for anyone to sign up and use.
But what you're using right now is the free tier. That one will let you create up to, I think, 3 namespaces, and you can run up to 10 pods per namespace. So it's pretty flexible. The idea here is it's enough for you to build an application. And what else it has? You have access to the build service, to the registry. There's also like secrets you can create if you want to have a like mvars overridden during deployment time. And then there's a pay tier, which gives you more CPU, more memory, and more pods in case you have a bigger application that doesn't fit on this tier.
That free tier, I think, will be great for many small teams or even solo developers. Yeah. They just don't really want to worry about any of this stuff, and they can get started super quick. So
that is the idea. When we were building, everything started with the open source project, and as we showed that to people, the CLI, one of the first things that a lot of our friends told us was, "This is great, but I don't want to run a cluster. I don't want to run a dev cluster." Or someone who was like in IT was like, "I don't want to give my dev team a dev cluster because they're going to keep, harassing me with like tickets and things to do." And that's where the idea to build this came to us. Was like, okay, maybe we can build this other component to give you self-service access to a cluster, apply all these policies so it can be shared among a team, so I can like override your changes and things like that. And that's how this other product came to be. And another thing also is that we also have a self-hosted version of Okteto Cloud. So if you have your own cluster, it's only a Helm install, and it's free for teams of up to 3 developers. So for small teams who have their own clusters, you can just get the same experience you saw today on your own cluster, which is also useful if you need to connect to VPCs or running a specialized hardware. Yep. We have a lot of users that run Okteto on like clusters with GPUs, and then they run their machine learning models through this kind of like remote terminal. And it's kind of a very cool way to mix Kubernetes and the power of having the cloud with like all the CPUs and still get this really fast dev cycle.
Awesome. All right, we kind of went on a little tour there. Let's jump back to our docs. Let's see if there's anything that we've missed, and then we can kind of take a look at maybe some of those other features that Okteto brings to the table. So we did do the Okteto up. There's information about the file synchronization, the container ports. We did look at the environment variables. We've seen all of that stuff being done. We did do this. I think well done. You went through the getting started guide without even having to reference it. That's pretty sweet. All right,
I might have done this demo once or twice before, maybe.
All right. Well, let's pick a couple of more things from this left-hand sidebar that you think might be interesting to talk about, and then I know that you've got another demo that you would like to do for us, so we can take a look at that after that.
Right. Well, one thing that you already mentioned is the Kubernetes credentials feature, which is you can download the kubeconfig through a UI or through a command line, and that enables you to use Okteto with pretty much whatever your favorite dev tool is. Anything that doesn't require you to have access to the full cluster, so anything that works at a namespace level will work with Okteto. So Lens, K9s, customized Helm, kubectl, any of these things. We've partnered with companies like Chaos Native, Litmus Chaos, works on Okteto. You can run your Chaos experiments there, things like that. That's one thing that's really cool. The other is the namespaces feature, which is that you can create more than one namespace. You can do it directly from the UI. There's a button there, new namespace, and you just create more namespaces. What I like about that is that Okteto manages everything, the namespace creation, the permissions, all those things are just for you. Yep. But you can always share namespaces with anybody else. One of the cool things about sharing namespaces is that right now you did Okteto up on the API, but you can actually do Okteto up on any service. You could share your namespace with me. I can then go do Okteto up on the front end, and then we can be working together, maybe working on a new API or a new version of the application without me having to wait for you to be done and send me a PR and then have to start the thing myself. So even if this sharing namespaces enables a really cool flow, or even if you just want, hey, I need help here, let me share my namespace, and then you can see the logs of my pods. You can see what I deployed. It's a really interesting way to, especially for teams that are remote, and where it might be hard to get someone to kind of, hey, come over to my desk and see what's going on. It's a simple way to kind of get that started. So that's something that I use a lot personally, and I like it. I like it as a way to make my team, again, going back to the same theme of making the team more efficient. That's something that's really cool.
Do you develop Okteto on Okteto?
Yes, we do. Yeah. We use it for everything. Like and it's getting back to what you were saying. One of the best things for me about building dev tools is that I'm a developer. So it's something like you're building for yourself. Like I use all those features. Like each of these features came either because we had a need, or someone from our community, hey, I want to do this other thing. And that's a really cool way. And I don't know about other spaces, but on DevTools, it's a really cool thing that I know, hey, this is something useful because I would use it. And this is the beginning. That helps a lot to kind of keep you focused and motivated and those things.
Yeah, I think that's just great advice to give to anyone that's thinking of starting a company or building a product. Like if you're solving a problem that you have, there's a good chance that you're going to be invested in it emotionally as well and continue to work on it even when things get tough. But you're also solving a problem that exists and hopefully other people have. And I think just working in that space, it's really difficult to say, I want to go fix this problem with this person over here if you don't have that problem. So yeah, it's really good that you use it.
It's definitely... And you're right on the motivation. It's so much easier when a developer comes to me and says, hey, I'm trying to deploy this Go app and I have this issue. Like, oh yeah, right, let me help you. And we debug it together. And yeah, you're right, we're missing this feature. And then we'll go and implement that. And then we'll go back to this developer and show him the feature. And she'll be very excited. It's a really nice flow that I like a lot. So it's part of why I'm on this business.
Definitely.
So another cool thing, if you want to dig deep, is go into the deploy methods. On the left.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So that's something. And then go on Git.
Yep.
So one thing we didn't cover, and that's quite powerful, is that Okteto allows you to deploy. When you click deploy, you can deploy an application from a Git repo, which you already showed. But you can also deploy. We have a catalog of applications that's powered by Helm, so you can deploy one-click deploy applications from Helm, or just from your terminal. When you deploy from Git, though, you have access to a lot of other features to customize your deployment. Like if you click on Okteto pipeline, this is kind of similar to the way CI/CD works, where you can define a script on how to deploy your application. And there's a lot of things there. If you don't have Okteto pipeline file, Okteto will try to guess what your repo looks like and deploy it. So if you have a Helm chart, it will do a Helm install. If you have a k8.yaml file, it will do kubectl apply. If you have a docker-compose file, it will do Okteto stacks. And if it can figure it out, it will tell you, hey, I don't know what to do. But you can always add this kind of like magic file, Okteto-pipeline, and you have full control. Some of our users do things like provision third-party services, provision cloud services if they need, all the way to, like movies, which builds and deploy the app. So that's a really cool thing where it opens the door to more complex deployments. Applications have different shapes, and sometimes you need to provision other resources. So that is a cool way where you can extend Okteto to do other things.
Nice. That was one of the things that actually, it popped into my head as we were playing with the movies example. I was like, oh, okay, there's an Okteto pipeline. I can define all these steps. And then when you showed me the dev one, in my head, I was like, well, it looks and feels like a docker-compose file, but it's not. But I mean, I could just use a docker-compose file, which, hopefully teams and stuff like that have been using it for a couple of years now. They're not losing that configuration. It's not going anywhere. They still have the flexibility to use that and deploy it using Okteto. And
yeah, that is actually one feature we just released last week. We kind of stealth released it. We haven't made any announcements. And thanks for bringing it up. It's really cool. We the team took the Compose spec, which is now open source for people who don't know this, and we implemented the entire spec to do a translation from Compose to Kubernetes. Because as you said, a lot of teams are still using Compose for development, and it's great. It's a really easy way to deploy your application and just kind of describe it and see it. And a lot of the teams that were using Okteto, they didn't like Helm that much, or they were not as used to Helm than they are to Compose. So we ended up implementing this feature. So if you go back to the Okteto UI, just real quick to show you a quick demo. Click on deploy. and go to from compose. And that is a very simple example, but you see that is an actual compose file.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hello world. You can put any compose file you want there. You can get like the movies app and things, and then you just deploy it. And Okteto will translate from compose to Kubernetes, create all the things for you. And our goal here is that anyone should be able to, if you have a repo with a Docker Compose on it, you should be able to click deploy, put your repo, and it will just work. If it doesn't work, we have a Slack. Go join the Kubernetes Slack. Go to the Okteto channel and talk to us, and we'll work on this together.
All right. Well, we did actually get a comment from Vignesh who told us to give it a try with Docker Compose. Are we feeling brave? Are you happy for me to pick a compose file?
Yeah. Of course. One that I like to demo is if you go find the Docker movie, the voting app. Do you know about that? Have you seen that demo?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I remember the Mobi voting app. So
that is the prototypical kind of like Docker Compose demo. So just if you go to GitHub, how can I send this to you? Do we have like a chat here?
This one here?
Well, that one, yeah, you got it. Just copy the URL. Let's see if it works.
All right.
Just copy the URL and go to Okteto. And just create a new namespace just for fun.
Just for fun. Okay.
We'll pile up on things.
Okay, we'll call this voting Rawkode. Hit deploy. We're going to do...
Go from Git.
Oh, from Git, and then just drop in the URL. Okay, so this has no Okteto pipeline. This is just a Docker Compose.
We don't own the repo. That repo is it's part of the Docker samples repo, so nothing there for us.
And just hit deploy. Okay, we got a clone. It detected the Docker Compose, and it's doing an Okteto stack deploy.
Okay, we'll see. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't think we've tested this one. One funny thing is that one of my co-founders and co-maintainers, Pablo, he used to work for this company called Tudum that Docker acquired, and they were actually the ones that creating the voting app samples. It was a nice kind of full circle of my friend working on that in Docker, and then we do our company. Now we're building this compatibility layer. But that's the core idea. Is we map the resources to Kubernetes. With the idea that as a developer, for a lot of these things you don't care. You just compose is good enough. Deploy your compose. It'll work. You can still use all the other tooling we showed today, Okteto Up, CLI, all those things. But with the added benefit that you don't have to keep these two different manifests, right? If you have a compose, just use compose. As you get deeper into Kubernetes and you start using Helm, then you can migrate to Helm or other things. But for a lot of people, compose is a really good format and it just works for them. So it's something that we're very excited. The implementation is open source. It's on the CLI. So it's something that we're very excited to see if people like, and then maybe it's something we can push for other teams or products to also start using.
Yeah, I don't know if the output here is, is it build kit? Because it doesn't look like a standard Docker build. So I'm assuming
it is build kit. So we forked build kit, and we added some extra code to make it more multi-tenant friendly. But at the core is build kit, like every other. We build on top of open source.
Yeah.
We're building on top of build kit, container registry. We use Nginx Ingress, Cert Manager, Kubernetes itself, mutation webhooks. And using build kit is also really cool because that allowed us to be compatible with any Docker file. Like you don't have to do anything special. You can even take advantage of all the cool things that build kit gives you, caching, different front ends, all those things. So it's there you go. It's getting there.
Yeah, I think build kit is just one of the most exciting things we've had in a while from the kind of container buildy Docker landscape.
It's amazing. It's amazing, and it's something that I don't know what I mean. More people should be using it. It's really powerful, and it's compatible with any Docker file. And
yeah, it still has an experimental flag right now, right? I think you have with at least with the Docker CLI, you have to explicitly enable the experimental features to be able.
You have to put a header, right? But definitely something that I don't know what the plan there is, but it's something that I highly recommend look into it, especially if you're building if you're building node images, just caching the node modules saves so much time on your builds.
Yeah.
Or caching the binary, the compiled folder on Node.
Yep.
Same thing on Go. It's really cool. So there we go. Let's see if it works. We have all green. There's an endpoint there. There we go.
Cool.
And then go back, and there's a results service that will show you your vote.
Hold on, let me click.
I think you can only vote once. One per person, but if anybody were to log in, that's a public endpoint. Anybody can log in and see the vote. But
damn it, my vote went to cats. Oh, never gonna live that down.
I'm a cat person, so yes.
I like cats and dogs, to be fair. I love all animals. I'm actually surrounded by, I've got chinchillas over here, 5 of them. I've got a free roaming ferret that lives in my office with me.
Oh, wow.
Dagoos in the other room. All animals are welcome here.
That's always nice.
Awesome. That was a nice little surprise. I had no idea that we could just throw Docker Compose at that. I mean, I have so many just like example repositories that I keep on GitHub with Docker Compose files in it, and just being able to drop that URL in here and have a nice visual representation. I think that's so important for people. Like, you know, a lot of people aren't indoctrinated into Kubernetes yet in containers. They've not been doing this for 4 years or 5 years. They've been doing it for weeks or months. And these GUIs, these GUIs are just there to make that easier for these people and get the logs out of it and work with it and browse the URL without having to worry about port forwards. And I love UIs like this that solve real problems.
Yes. That is for me part like super important is the ease of use, get you going. And like the best thing for me is when people tell us, hey, I'm not even thinking about, you know, Kubernetes. It's a great technology. I'm a big fan of it, involved for like many years now. But I like it when they become invisible, you know? It's like, I don't want to think of Kubernetes. I want to think of my application. We had one day we were chatting with Kelsey Hightower, and his advice was like, you need to make this invisible. Like, people care about their apps. Kubernetes is great. It solves huge amount of problems. But what we care about is what our apps can do. So that's what we're trying to do here is to speed you up so that you can get to the app phase of your work as quickly as possible, and then build forwards, endpoints, infrastructure itself should just be a given. Hey, it will just be there for you, and just change your code, see the results as fast as possible, and be there.
Awesome. We actually have a comment from Sangam who has suggested that you don't even need Docker installed if you have the CLI.
That's a good point, Sangam. Yes, Sangam is one of our oldest, dearest members of the community. Yeah, you're right, Sangam. With Okteto build, because the build service is running on the cloud, whether it's on our cloud or if you install Okteto on your own cluster, then the builds happen remotely. So you don't have to run Docker. Like I got Mac Mini and one of the new ones, M1s. I didn't even install Docker on this machine. I've been using the Okteto build. It's compatible with the CLI, and because it uses BuildKit, it can build anything. So it's it's another small benefit. You're surprised how many people just mentioned that, hey, not having to run so many things on my local machine makes them so much happier. And you know, especially if you're using hardware that is not like super powerful. Like, you know, not everybody in the world has like a MacBook Pro with like, you know, God knows how many cores at this point. Like a lot of people are working on more modest machines.
Yeah. So
being able to offload a lot of that to a cluster makes their life significantly better.
Yeah. I'm already fully believing in the remote development server approach. I think I'm done of spending 8 hours a day listening to the fans on my MacBook. I do not want to hear my fans anymore. I just want nice silence and my editor to run, hopefully nice and quiet, and just focus on the code. And just offload all of this computational heavy stuff like building images and node modules. And I'm a Rust developer, so I need to sit and watch Rust build times for 14 hours all the time. Like, you know, there are machines that are built to do this really, really fast, and they're not my MacBook. They're not my local Linux machine. They're in the cloud, and they're much better suited. So.
Yeah, and then I love that you can just spin them up, and where you're like Okteto will automatically spin down your environments after a few hours that they've been idle. And I love that, because it's like I didn't have to think about cleanup. I just launched my like this. I'm running my application, I'm building things. When I'm done, when I go do something else, it will spin up, spin down. I don't have to worry about that thing being running all the time. I don't have to worry about clean it up. When I'm done, destroy, redeploy, and I'm much happier that way. One less thing to worry about.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, let's get back to our demo. I kind of forgot for a second we're actually live streaming.
So one more thing I wanted to show you. I can't show you. I prepared a demo. We have a really I like this. We have an integration with GitHub. Right now, GitHub Actions is actually down. I've been looking at the status page, but if you go to the docs, I'll show you. One of the things we're exploring here was, now that you have your Okteto pipeline and you have your dev environment defined in Okteto, you can also take that and use it as part of your PR process. So if you click on the preview environments menu on the left, and yeah, just go there. The idea here is you're using the same pipeline, the same flow as a developer, but now you're going to attach it to any PR. So the idea here is, I have my code, I send a PR, GitHub will run an action, will create another namespace, will deploy my application there, will send the link to the PR, and then anyone in your team, anyone that you're working with, they can now see the code, but also see the application running with your code on it. It's something that GitLab does, and that Heroku kind of pioneered, that I really like. So we brought this into Okteto with the idea that now you have a dev environment and a preview environment with the same configuration, no extra work, and it works really well, especially with GitHub Actions. If you scroll down, you'll see that the action is quite simple to deploy. It's just log in, create namespace, run your pipeline, and then get the URL back to the PR. And this is something that we use internally a lot. Like every time we do, like for instance, a change on a website, we generate a preview environment, and then everyone on the team can look at the website, add comments on the text, on the looks, on the color, on the wordiness. Yep. And that's a cool way to involve people on your PRs who might not care about the code, or they might not be experts on the code, but they are experts on the results of your code. And that's something that we're pushing on. It works on GitHub, it works on GitLab. We're working on integrations with Bitbucket, with CircleCI. It's just a script, so you can Jenkins, it can work everywhere. But on GitHub, I really like the actions model. It's an easy way to integrate, and then everything goes into your repo, so that everyone can look at it and just benefit from it. So that's another cool thing that they're kind of encouraging people to try, see if they like it, see if it's beneficial. And if it is, please let us know so we can build more of that.
Do you want to try it, or do you think Actions being down just means it's not going to work at all?
It's not going to work right now because I think GitHub Actions, it's still on yellow. It's still degraded. So I promise. I set up a repo last night. I was working on a really cool demo of Compose with GitHub Actions, but it is down. But I'll share the link later on Twitter if anybody's interested to try. But the easiest thing is go to the docs, copy that action, and you can use the Movies app for that, or your own, even better.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll make sure I'll get the URL from you. We can put that into show notes, and when anyone watching not live, they can definitely check that out and have a go at it. It's definitely something I think I'll be keen to try it and see how that works. Very nice integration there. All right, Ramiro, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think will be interesting to show the user before we finish up today?
Last thing is on the left, click on the Developed on Okteto button. That is something, that's my personal favorite. So I want to take this opportunity to show it to the world.
On the movies repository.
When you have a repo that works with Okteto, you can add that button to anything, a README on GitHub, a documentation on your internal page. When you click that button, that will automatically deploy an application on Okteto for you. You just put a link to the URL of the repo, and instructions are below. But it's something that if you go to the movies repo right now, you can just take it. Yeah.
So it's just cloud.okteto.com, and then it's got like a hash symbol and a deploy with a repository. But we can take a look at that.
Just pass repository, and you can also pass the branch if you want a specific branch. So it's something that some of our early adopters, especially in the open source community, are using as a way to give their maintainers or contributors a one-click experience of like, click here and get the application running. And once your app is running, then you can develop whichever way you want. But it's a nice way to replace, like a long README with many steps. Instead, you codify it on this repo and one click, and it just runs.
Very nice. I like that feature too. All right, I think we've got one question, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So let's pop it back here. Russell is asking, let me just push this up here. Are there any Okteto features for allowing multiple people to develop their own version of the same service at the same time? Or is that outside the scope of what Okteto offers?
Yes, that is part of the experience. There's two ways to do that. One is when you show the namespaces, every developer gets their own namespace. So you could have, I can have my namespace with the Movies app. David has his. And when we develop, they're completely isolated. So you deploy your own copy. We're also working on a feature. I'm going to out this, so my dev team might hate me. But I'm kidding. We're actually looking forward to share this with the world. Working on a new feature where you're going to be able to deploy kind of like a canonical version of your application, let's say your integration environment. And then you're going to be able to develop only specific services. And we're going to use a mix of service mesh and networking rules so that, let's say, the Movies app, I have my API, you have your API, I'm going to have a unique URL. So when I go through my URL, that request will hit my API. And when you go through your URL, it's going to hit your API, which for applications like the Movies app doesn't make much sense. But if you have a big application with 20, 30 microservices, some heavy infrastructure, that'd be a cool way to interact more like in a team layer. So stay tuned. That will come out soon. We'll be posting a blog post on that, but it's going to be called Divert, because you divert traffic from the main to your app.
Yep.
And yeah, definitely team collaboration is an aspect that we're very interested in improving. That is where we started with the namespace per developer. But yeah, we're only getting started. So any feedback on that, any comments, I would love to talk to you all. So I'll join the Discord, and we have a channel, Okteto, in the Kubernetes Slack. So if you want to talk about this later, if you want to share your experience, please join us. I would love to talk to all of you.
Awesome. Well, on that, Ramiro, I'll just say thank you very much for joining us today and walking us through Okteto. It's a really cool tool. I love the frictionless approach to what is a really annoying problem, getting bootstrapped or starting on projects and getting productive as fast as possible. And Okteto seems like a really cool tool that exposes a whole bunch of features to make that easier for people. So thank you for your good work. And I hope that a lot of people watching enjoy it and will check it out in their own time. Ramiro, have a wonderful day. Thank you again, and I will speak to you soon.
Thanks to you, David. It was fun. Good seeing you all.
Bye.
Bye.